I'm recording. And if there's something you would like to ask, you can ask whatever you want. And if there's nothing to ask me, I'll go to my first question.
Okay.
So if talking in very general terms, why do we have some people who are more empathetic to others, and there are some people who are less empathetic to others? How empathy work from the neurobiologist's point of view? Like really general, because we'll have some specific questions as well. But in general, why are people different in terms of empathy?
Well, people are different in terms of everything. All our behaviors have a lot of variation. And variation was the motor of evolution. And we can discuss the idea that evolution of our brain has stopped, but the variation is still there. So there are people that are very empathic, and there are people that are not empathic at all. And the whole scala in between is present.
Thank you very much. Can you tell us, are there some common periods in our lives when we can say, like, can we, draw a graph and say this is a period where people tend to have less empathy, and then probably because maybe our prefrontal cortex finally forms, we have some growth of empathy. Does it work that way, or there are no like common for everybody like periods when we have this more or less empathic behavior towards others?
So one of the important compounds in empathy is oxytocin. And we knew oxytocin as a hormone that is releasing milk and also causing contractions in labor. But oxytocin is also released into the brain. And then it is a social peptide. It is involved in empathy. And if you look in evolution, then the basis of empathy is the care of the mother for the child. And if a mother is giving the breast to a child, then oxytocin is released into the brain of the mother. But also oxytocin is released into the brain of the child because the way the mother is keeping the child. So warm contact is very important. And this gives an interaction between mother and child that is very important for the rest of the lives. If this does not take place, then the child can also not make warm contacts later in life. So there's a critical period in which you can learn to have this type of bonding. Another period in which oxytocin is released very strongly is when you fall in love. And that is, of course, also increasing the bonding between two people. Also, when you make love, then there's oxytocin released and gives some bonding. So it's different periods are characterized by different releases of oxytocin, and therefore also the building up of this behavior.
Thank you very much for this. Are there some other reasons why people why empathy can be more or less in other people? Well, you said this warm bonding with a mother when you were a child. Maybe there's something else that might influence the level of empathy in a person when this person grows up.
Yeah, so oxytocin is a peptide, and peptide works in the brain on the basis of the presence of receptors. Those are proteins that bring the message of oxytocin into the cell. And there are small variations in the genes responsible for the receptors. So we all have the same genes, but within the genes, there are small differences, and we call them polymorphisms. And for oxytocin receptors, there are 32 variants, and they determine the sensitivity of the person for oxytocin. Some persons can be very sensitive, others not so sensitive or not at all, depending on the type of receptor. Yeah, that I think is one of the reasons of the variation.
Thank you very much. So we spoke about what happens in the brain of the person who has empathy towards other, or in genome of this person. And now it's interesting for me, what happens on the other side? What happens, like which traits or what can influence on whether people will be more or less empathetic towards one person? Can it be that our level of empathy for a person can depend on something, psychologists call it halo effect, like maybe we see somebody more attractive or less attractive, or maybe there can be like even less obvious reasons, like the smell of the person that makes us feel more empathy towards this person. So what make one person more or less attractive to feel this empathy from others?
Yeah, indeed, there are pheromones. So those are compounds excreted in sweat and urine that are different for the sexes, and they are also involved in the interaction between people. Beautiful people have always advantage also in empathy, but you can see a kind of circle of empathy around a person. If the circumstances are very bad, like in war, then the circle of empathy is very narrow. So it's the family, children, but the rest is at that moment less important. And if there is a good situation outside, then you see that the circle of empathy is becoming larger and larger. And if you have a very good circumstances in the environment, then the circle can even include animals. So what I always give as an example is that I'm also working in China. And in China, when there was not enough food, they were eating dogs. But nowadays, I see more and more people walking dogs. And they are very much against eating dogs. So the empathy circle has increased. And of course, the most extensive increase of the empathy circle is the rules we have for enemies. So the rules in war, that goes to the extreme.
So you said that during such stressful situation as can be when we have war, we have more empathy to who's really close to us, but probably less empathy to all others. Others are not so important as our families, our relatives. So what happens with our empathy when we're under stress? Do we like have less people to have this empathetic bond with? And if yes, then why it happens? What happens in our brain when we're under stress, and how we perceive others in terms of empathy when we are under stress?
Yeah, under stress, there is a release of stress hormones in the brain. And that's a series of circuits and systems that is involved. And that suppresses also our social interactions. So somebody who is under extreme stress can go into a depression. And then, of course, there is no attention anymore for other people, not even for themselves. So extreme stress is leading to depression and gives also a view on the interactions of this type of systems.
Thank you very much. We've now described how things works in more or less like probably general people. I don't know how to say it right, like most of the people, but I would also like to ask you about specific cases, like specific diagnoses or specific states. There's a lot of them that you described in your books, and I'll ask you something about sociopaths, psychopaths, and such kind of people. But also before this, I would like to ask you a couple of words about autistic people, because we know, like at least there's such common view that people with autism, they either have this lack of empathy, or their empathy should be trained, or they just don't they are not able to understand and feel others. But there are also lots of recent researches, and I don't know if you have seen them, but they claim that people with autism can have the opposite phenomenon that we haven't known about before, such as hyper empathy, and they can feel others so strong that it's even overwhelming for them. So it's like the opposite of what we thought about people with autism. So have you seen these researches, and do you find them credible?
Yes, but it is very rare. In autism in general, there is a lack of social interaction. So I remember an autistic person telling me, it's not that I don't like people, but I feel more comfortable when they are not in the neighborhood. And they can very well interact by internet. They can be very focused on the topic of their work, but in interaction, eye contact is very difficult for them. And there are quite some observations that the oxytocin system is less active in this variant or disorder.
Thank you very much. Speaking about other diagnoses, I've read from your book that people, not only as I've imagined it, that like again psychopaths or narcissists probably have some problems with empathy, or maybe have this increases of aggression, but also different diseases might cause the increasing of aggression, such as schizophrenia, dementia, BPD, which is borderline personality disorder, or even ADHD, which now seems so common. And do you think that, speaking about this, probably maybe, I don't know, utopian world where our laws are built together with people who know how our brains work, and we like have, I don't know, some neuroscientists who also write legislation, will different diagnoses be taken into account? Can we say that if people have something that people probably think they are able to control, like some people think that ADHD is just bad behavior, or like BPD is just you're being emotional or something like this. So can we like say that different diagnoses will be taken into account when uh, we'll be thinking of a punishment for a crime?
Yeah, well, one good example is that the prefrontal cortex, the most frontal part of the brain, has one of the functions control of impulses, and also the keeping the moral rules. But the prefrontal cortex is developing very slowly, and law generally thinks that we are adult at the age of 18, but if you look to the prefrontal cortex, it's only around 23. And that is in the Netherlands the only the only time that politics has listened to neuroscience, in the sense that juvenile law is now going up to 23 instead of 18. And in juvenile law, the focus is on preventing that something criminal is happening again. And there's a lot of focus on the circumstances of somebody to improve that, also to include the family or the environment in general, more than on punishment. Of course, there must be some punishment, because we have to make clear that people, we have a very complex society. And the complex society can only function on the basis of those rules. And we are social animals. We should not damage the others. And so we should make people clear, even if they have a brain disorder, that is not acceptable, what they did. But we should do it in a way that doesn't damage the person in its development, in its education, in its schooling, or in its job. And so there's a lot of attention for that in the Netherlands. We also have a possibility to combine punishment with treatment. And the treatment can be psychological, psychiatric, but also medical in general. And that's an obligatory type of treatment. So people have to do that in order to be released again. And of course, there are also a few people that never can become a good citizen after that. And then it is decided after quite some time to keep those people in long stay, because they will always damage society. But on the other hand, they didn't choose for that. It's a matter of a disorder of brain development. So they should be kept under good conditions. So there's a lot of interaction between medicine and law in that sense.
There were different interesting uh, parts of your books when you said about people unintentionally being aggressive towards other, like people who were asleep and they could even kill someone.
Yeah.
But there are lots of cases when people do this intentionally, and it seems like they do understand that they hurt other people, that they do some damage to someone else, like physically or emotionally or psychologically. And do you think, is it possible for a person to hurt another person and to understand, to have this empathy on some level, to realize the harm he or she does to this another person, but still feel like maybe even pleasure from it? And if it's possible, why do you think this happens?
Well, again, there is a huge variability, and even during war, you can see the most terrible things happening. But there are always people also during wars that don't participate in torture or whatever. Well, in order to have those terrible things happening, I think people are prepared by leaders. And we have, of course, in the history, many examples of that. Let's say the Cultural Revolution with Mao, Stalin in Russia, Hitler, nowadays Putin. People are prepared by a set of measures. In the first place, it's very important to have an enemy and to dehumanize the enemy, to make it animals or whatever for the people that are going to fight. And then it's important to make the group, to focus the group on the same thing, on the enemy. And therefore uniforms are used, and songs and dances, and everything that is bringing the group together. And then with a populistic leader that is using the emotions of the population, then you see that the group is going to become a super organism. It's going to show what we call self-organization, and it's becoming one organism that is moving as if the personality of people has disappeared. So it's going from I to we. And people don't feel any responsibility for what they are doing, because it's the group that wants it, it's the leader that wants it. So it's a whole process that prepares people for the most terrible things. And you see that in history happening over and over again. That is in fact the mechanism going to develop a superorganism.
Thank you very much. Actually, how you answered the previous question makes me want to ask you about propaganda itself.
Yeah.
Can we say that being under the, well, propaganda is kind of, for me, it seems like it's an intervention into our prefrontal cortex to make us think of somebody the way our not our but one's leader wants to think, and make and show aggression towards this group of people. So can we say that being under the propaganda is kind of something like mental disorder?
Yeah, I think it's called brainwash, and that means that your brain is changed, and it's changed by the leaders and the group interaction. And yeah, it's a kind of disorder. Like falling in love is also a disorder. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. Well, the other thing I would like to ask you is about actually being a victim, and I don't only mean like being a victim in global terms, in terms of war, but also a victim of some personal relations. There are many things. There are many articles now in popular psychology which tells us who narcissists are, who psychopaths are, sociopaths, who are those people who hurt other people on some kind of interpersonal level as well. And we also see at least those, mass rush of information that we have about those people. They even are called dark triad, which includes Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy. And for me, it's very interesting to hear from you what's wrong with empathy in those people from the point of view of neurobiology, and what also happens in brain of their victims. Why do such strong bonds form in both types of people?
Yeah, as I said in the beginning, there's a huge variation in empathy. And there are people who have hardly any empathy, although we should also distinguish different forms of empathy. So we always speak about empathy if we mean a type of caring empathy, caring for the others. But there's also rational empathy, and there's transposition empathy. So it's not only the caring empathy. And psychopaths have some empathy, which is based on rational arguments. So they can, they know that they should show something like empathy, but they don't have the same feelings with it. And psychopath is very focused on his aim, and the aim is always important for himself. And he does everything in order to reach that aim. Doesn't care about the consequences for other people. And I must say that in some functions, they are useful. So if you think about a reorganization of a big company, the company is going to be finished if they don't discharge 3,000 people. Well, this is something you should not do with a lot of empathy, because then you go nowhere. You have to talk to all the people and to all the families, and you see what terrible things you are doing to them. So you need somebody with very little empathy. And that is typically a function for somebody who has psychopathic properties. And then such a person is doing it so well in the international company or international banks that they are taken up in the board. And then the person is going with the same aim for himself, for financial gain. He is continuing, and it might cause tremendous damage to the bank or the company ultimately. And that's also the type of people that caused the banking crisis and the financial crisis in the Western world. But I've also talked to a general, a Dutch general, who said, well, I like to have one or two of those guys in my group, because there are circumstances in the war that they can be used very well. And so they can also be heroes in a war, because they have no fear. They go straight to their aim. They don't care about what they do to others when they go for that aim. So they can be used in extreme circumstances. And there's an interesting book about a professor, one of the American professors, who did the first studies on the prefrontal cortex and in psychopathy. And he had a group of psychopaths and a group of controls. And he found that in psychopaths in general, there's less activity in the prefrontal cortex. But there was one exception. In the controls, there was also a person who had less activity in the prefrontal cortex. And then they were sitting together and asking the question, where did we make a mistake in the processing of the data? It didn't appear to be the case. And when they looked for the names of all the persons, then this person, the control with less activity in the prefrontal cortex, was the professor himself. And then he was thinking about his development, and he was finding more and more of those typical psychopathic behaviors when he was young. And after a while, he was talking to his mother, and he found out that there was even a murder in the family that nobody was talking about. And so finally, he came to the conclusion that it all depends on the way you are growing up, the way you are educated, you are scientifically trained, whether you can use those characteristics to build a big group, to get money for the group, to get space, to get equipment. You need this type of psychopathic properties also. So it all depends where such people are, which are at the extreme of the variation, find a job. They can be either used or damaging others.
Well, when someone with these psychopathic traits, they become charismatic leaders. When they head the state, it's huge, dangerous. It's a huge danger. And my question is, well, it seems like when we know something, well, knowledge gives us opportunity to avoid some mistakes that we might have done before.
Mhm.
And do you think if neurobiology can somehow prevent those psychopaths, those narcissists, those people who don't care about humanity in general, or like some groups of people at least, can neurobiology prevent those people? Like, can knowledge that we have from neurobiology somehow prevent this from happening in the future, that those people won't
Mhm.
have the opportunity to rule states, to take part in very important global processes?
Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult. And I sometimes think that ruling a state means that you should stepwise go through a process in which psychopathic traits are very useful. So we can wonder whether somebody can rule some states without those properties. But then, of course, the question is, how can you handle those people when they are in the top? And yeah, it's if they are in the top, it's very difficult to correct them. But we see now some movements in the European Union. I think that they have put a lot of pressure, financial pressure, on Poland, which has made a change. And I hope that they will put also a lot of pressure on Hungary to make this change. And it seems that there are voices in Hungary that see the danger. So I'm hopeful that this will happen. And in that sense, the European Union is, let's say, an umbrella over the leaders, and might be able to correct them to some level. And further, I told you already about the prison and the measures we can take when people have caused damage in order to treat them. And if they are not treatable, and always give damage to have them in a long stay. Morality, I think, is it's good to say that it's not something you learn from the church of your parents. Morality is needed, as I told, to let the complex society function. And I don't know whether Frans de Waal, is that a name that rings a bell to you? He,
Yes, he actually were here also at our Kunsht
okay,
camera a couple of years before. I know that he recently, unfortunately, has passed,
yes,
but
he
it,
has passed away a week ago. Yeah,
yeah,
and
but he was,
he is described the monkey society. And then you see that the big apes, they have the same moral rules as we have. There's also empathy. There's also a fear to pass the laws in the society. They help old uh, apes to get to the right place and to get food. So all those rules that are important in the monkey society are also present in our society. And that means that those rules are not given to us by our parents or the church, but are given by us, by our DNA. They are in our DNA, but with all the variations we were talking about it. If people understand that, and it's also better to understand why some people are different. In fact, every brain is unique. Every brain is not unique to be unique. Everybody is unique. You know? Every brain is different. And some brains are functioning better in a complex society than others. And there are periods in which people don't function very well in a society, for instance, in puberty. But then we should also realize that those are the people that have to change society. Because in my age, it's too late for revolution. And young people have to change the society and adapt the society to the novel things that are happening. And so they should also have the space to experiment with that and be against the rules of the old society and fight against it. And when they are going over the line and be put and catched by the police, we should also realize that they are in the period of education, learning, and a job and schooling. And it means that you should give them a type of punishment that is not destroying the future. It can happen to everyone. We had Queen Beatrix as the former queen in the Netherlands. But when she was 15, she was catched with her friends in stealing some food. And then the police brought them to the police station and called the Queen Mother of Beatrix. And the mother said, what are you doing with those girls? And the police officer said, well, we keep them for 2 hours and then we let them go, just to show that they shouldn't do this. And then the Queen Mother said, you should keep Beatrix twice as long because she should give the good example. So it can happen everywhere. And we should notice that in puberty, some 30% of the kids may come in contact with the police and be prepared to solve that in a good way.
Thank you very much for this answer and for all of your answers. I'll also ask you one more, and then I see one question in our group chat here. So my last question will be, I love to ask something weird at the end of our interviews. And my weird question for you will be, do you think if it's possible to diagnose somebody as a psychopath just from a TV, from a picture that we oftenly receive when we when we read or listen to or watch news by persons' speeches, by persons' actions, by persons' behavior in general? Can we like looking for somebody who and we are not maybe, I mean, maybe a psychiatrist can do it, not consulting those people directly and asking them questions or putting them devices which can work there, but just from a distance. Can we, do you think, diagnose psychopaths, narcissists in this way?
Well, I think so, but psychologists are very much against that. On the other hand, I think that we get so much information by the TV and the press, so much detailed information. And if we are convinced that the information is not colored in a certain way and it's objective, then I think we can very well say this leader of this big country in the eastern part is a psychopath. No problem with that. If
Thank you very much for this. And I see the commentary on our chat from Diana. She said, "Thank you for your fantastic work. I wonder which groups of people can be over empathic. What are positive and negative sides of it?"
well, I think you can. It's very difficult to be over empathic, and also for the amount of empathy, it's important that you adapt your job to the way your brain is functioning. So I'm also working in the university hospital here, and those people, the nurses are really empathic, and so they are on the right place for the way their brain has developed. And I think that is what the time of schooling and education and training is. You have to find out what the best place is to function for you. And that's for everybody different.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your conversation, for your amazing books, for your amazing work that you do, for giving us a time. Okay, I see one more question. I'm sorry. Lisa asking, hello, thank you so much for an opportunity to join this event. What's different and what's common between empathy that one experiences in a direct human contact and empathy to a character in a movie or a book?
Well, if it's a good movie, then there is no difference. And for the book also, if it's well written, you really feel empathy. For a movie, you can really be in tears about something that is happening. No, I don't think that there is any difference.
Thank you very much. I remember I asked you if you have 40 minutes of your time, and I see we're now out of this time. So I'm thankful again, and I'm thankful to everyone who joined. And this article will be on our website, kunst.com UI. So thank you very much again. It was a pleasure talking to you, and we really appreciate that you that you agreed to come here and share this interesting and useful information with us.
Well, you're welcome, and I hope that your country has a very good future and that this difficult period is over soon. All the best to you and your country.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.